Are you curious about how Capstone Leadership Solutions can help your small healthcare organization to improve and grow with more speed and ease? If so, reach out to us at capstoneleadership.net. There's a contact us page, or you can email us at info@capstoneleadership.net. We're here to help. When fear is high, whether it's from looming Medicaid cuts, budget uncertainty, or just the sense that big changes are coming, your team is watching closely. But here's what might be the key: they're not actually possibly looking to you for all the answers, they're looking to you for anchoring. So, what does this mean? It means they need to see that you're steady, that you haven't lost sight of the mission, that you're not letting fear write the narrative. Anchoring is showing up with calm clarity. It's about being honest about the challenge without catastrophizing. It's reminding people what remains true, what we still believe in, and what we can control.
Welcome to Culture Change RX, the podcast for healthcare professionals that are committed to creating a thriving workplace culture, improving the experiences of employees and patients, and ultimately unlocking their organization's next level of potential. I'm Sue Tetzlaff, your host and co-founder of Capstone Leadership Solutions. Join me and my insightful guests each week as we share actionable insights for navigating the crucial people side of the business of healthcare. Subscribe now for a weekly dose of Culture Change RX. Now let's dive into this week's conversation where culture change takes center stage.
Welcome to another episode of the podcast. It is me, Sue Tetzlaff, the co-host of Culture Change RX and the co-founder of Capstone Leadership Solutions. And today, our topic of the podcast is focused on trust in senior leadership. Now, what I've noticed as a healthcare executive myself for 22 years, but also now as a strategist, trainer, and coach to dozens of healthcare organizations over the past almost 14 years, is that there's two categories of trust building activities in senior leadership. So when you want to develop a culture of trust and having your workforce, having your community, having your medical staff trust senior leadership, that there's really two categories of actions or activities or scenarios where this trust can be built or diminished or lost. And those two categories are the day-to-day activities of senior leaders, so the day-to-day behaviors and activities of senior leaders, and just the normal routine of running and leading and being an executive in a complex organization such as healthcare. So in the day-to-day, we can be taking action, behaving in ways that either builds trust or diminishes it. So things that do that day to day might be having and consistently adhering to a communication plan. So we have a plan, and every time we deliver on it, we build trust. It can be setting and achieving plans and goals and being very transparent about what these plans are, what these goals are. And when we set and then we act on them and we achieve them or make progress on them, we're building trust that we have these plans and these goals, and you can trust that we're making them happen. We're leading the efforts to make them happen. It could be when we as senior leaders empower our frontline leaders and teams and even take actions ourselves to act on the voice of our employees and or our patients. So when we have surveys where we gather the voice and the ideas of our employees, when we have patient surveys that gather the input and the voice of our patients, or patient advisory councils, that we indeed listen and prioritize and act and empower others to act on the voice of employees and patients. So these are ways that day to day we're elevating trust in the culture, trust in particular in senior leadership. But then there's this other piece, right? There's this other category of actions or behaviors or these other scenarios in which trust in senior leadership can be elevated, grow, be strengthened, or the opposite, be diminished. And that's during challenging times. That's when there's something going on either internally or externally that's kind of a big deal, right? And it's rocking the boat. in big ways. So it's not just the day-to-day activities of running a healthcare organization and leading a healthcare organization. It is those episodic scenarios that will surface internally or externally to challenge the entire organization. So we saw that, for example, obviously during the times of the pandemic. And we're seeing that today, in particular in rural healthcare. I see all of the advocacy actions by the state associations and CEOs and the like related to the challenges of the proposed Medicaid cuts and its impacts or projected impacts on small and rural healthcare organizations in particular, which is the place where we do our work is in small and rural healthcare organizations. So these fears that are surfacing around organizational viability, securing jobs, and protecting the quality of care. Now, certainly healthcare executives like CEOs of rural hospitals, it's important to have their voice heard on the advocacy stage for adequate and proper funding for the services provided to community members through these healthcare organizations. And, there's a fine line, I think, between advocating and awfulizing. And not that we're embellishing, not that these proposed cuts won't lead to real negative consequences. I don't want to diminish that. But through the process of advocating and surfacing and giving voice, loud voice, repetitive voice to these negative consequences, that is not only heard by government officials, decision makers at that level, but it's also heard by your team. It's heard by your community. It's heard by your providers. And this can lead to fear. And fear is actually the root cause of silo behavior, where people start to shift into self-preservation. So fear, whether from real or perceived threats, can drive individuals and entire teams and departments to turn inward. So that fear starts to leave this footprint in your culture. And while you might be taking action day to day to elevate cross-department and interdisciplinary teamwork to be able to have great and improving and growing day-to-day operations, what fear starts to do is shut that down. So when we want to have great clinical care, when we want to have service excellence, when we want to have a culture of collaboration and teamwork, that's actually being worked against when fear is heightened. In my own experience as a senior leader, I remember leading for about a 2-year period of time as a chief nursing officer with fear in the organization around the selection of our current CEO. It was a misstep in the history of the organization for this individual to be selected as the CEO. And the actions that he was taking through that seat in that position was creating a large amount of fear in the organization. People who had been with the organization for a long time, their jobs were being eliminated with seemingly no explanation or understanding as to why, which meant that anyone could go on any day. Decisions were being made for large purchases without input from stakeholders and seemingly not in the best interest of specific departments or service lines or patient care. And as a senior leader myself, I felt like my job during that era of our organization, that episodic challenge, was to protect my frontline leaders, my clinical staff, and the patients, right? I felt like I needed to turn inward. I needed to get into protective mode. We weren't in improvement mode. We weren't in growth mode. We were in protection mode. And if you stay in that mode for too long, it does create a dent in your culture, something to be remedied and recovered from quickly and effectively. So as I went about protecting my silo, right, the clinical aspects, the nursing units, the clinical patient care aspects of the organization, when I went about doing that, I was doing it in such a way that I wanted them to not feel the fear. Like I wanted to take the bullets. I wanted to buffer that from them. But what I learned about that was they felt it anyway. They knew it was going on anyway. I thought I was doing a really good job keeping day-to-day operations going, trying to keep the collaboration high, the fear low, the negative impacts minimized. But in the end, what I realized, especially when the fear was lifted, when the board made the change in this, when we started to get into the recovery of this, was that right down to the front line, right down to the nurses' aides, they all knew about the threat. They all felt the impacts of the threat, and they now felt the relief and the beginning of recovery from those threats. So while I was involved as a senior leader in feeling this fear, being impacted by this fear, operating in my senior leadership role out of this fear into a more siloed versus collaborative leadership mindset, the staff as well had shifted into this self-preservation mode as well. When fear is high, whether it's from looming Medicaid cuts, budget uncertainty, or just the sense that big changes are coming, your team is watching closely. But here's what might be the key. They're not actually possibly looking to you for all the answers. They're looking to you for anchoring. So what does this mean? It means they need to see that you're steady, that you haven't lost sight of the mission, that you're not letting fear write the narrative. Anchoring is showing up with calm clarity. It's about being honest about the challenge without catastrophizing. It's reminding people what remains true, what we still believe in, and what we can control. So the next time you're in a meeting and things feel uncertain, or you're rounding and things are feeling uncertain, ask yourself, am I anchoring my team? Or am I unintentionally adding weight to the waves? So you might be awfulizing in closed door rooms or in your head. Your teams can feel that. I watched a CEO do this just recently when I was on site with one of our partner organizations, and we were spending 2 full days offsite with all of their leadership team, and their amazing CEO spent time with their leaders talking openly about proposed federal changes, 3 in particular, that could have negative consequences on them fulfilling their mission and their vision, and are not in alignment and in keeping with their organization's values. What I watched him do that was just so amazing was he went through and he named each threat honestly, but he framed it with confidence that even if that threat became a reality, he had trust in the senior leadership team, the frontline management team, the providers, and the staff to persevere in the pursuit of their mission and their vision. Yes, indeed, it would be a challenge, but they were ready for challenges. And their commitment to their mission, their commitment to their vision, their commitment to their values would pull them together versus cause them to fall apart. And what I saw in the eyes of the leaders in the audience was they trusted him. They believed him. He's certainly staying visible. He's certainly staying calm. He's certainly staying connected. When these external challenges can happen, what can happen is our senior leadership has to go outside and put additional efforts outside of their organization to deal with these external threats when the people inside also need them the most. And so that's a balance to stay visible, to stay calm, to stay connected to your teams, to your leaders, to your staff, to your providers when external challenges are pulling your time and attention outside of the organization. And what I clearly heard him do was reinforce the organization's purpose, its values, and what won't change, right? These things may have to change, but we know these things are our steady. These things won't change. So in a climate of uncertainty, our natural reflex may be to protect, but the strategy for greatness is to connect, to stay connected to our people, to stay connected to our mission, our vision, our values, to be anchored in that. Fear is contagious, but so is trust. Leaders don't have to have it all figured out. They don't have to have all the answers, but they do need to show up in a way that aligns with the culture they've worked so hard to build. Your team doesn't expect certainty, but they do need clarity, they need presence, and they need anchoring. So what are 3 actionable takeaways for you as senior leaders during times of external threats and fears that can impact and build a footprint of fear in your culture and maybe even diminish trust in your senior leadership team. So, number one, say what's true and also what's still solid, right? So, acknowledge the threat, like potential funding cuts, but also reinforce the constants. We may lose this, but we still have that. And with that, we can fulfill our mission. We can still live our values. And number two, even though you may be distracted by and have additional work on your plate to advocate and to plan and prepare, it still requires you to do those day-to-day things that build that constant trust, that constant drip of trust, elevates that trust day to day that I mentioned at the top of this episode. So staying consistent on your communication plan, staying committed to your plans and goals, continuing to act on the voice of your employees and your patients. So those things that you're doing day to day that are those consistent trust builders, you can't let go of them during this time of challenge. When you're looking at your to-do list, you're going to want to let them go. But these are the anchors, and your staff, your providers, your frontline leaders will feel the chaos of letting that go. So now we got the fear and now we got the chaos. So don't compound the challenge by letting go the day-to-day tactics that build and strengthen trust between the senior leadership team and the rest of the organization and even the community. They need to rely on this more than ever during times of challenge. Number three, double down on your visibility and accessibility. Don't retreat to your office. I saw a CFO do this once during a financial challenging time where they had to announce all sorts of budget cuts and even salary cuts. And the CFO actually put a piece of paper over his window in his door and locked his door. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't retreat to your offices. Be present. Be accessible, be listening, even if you don't have the answers yet. And maybe a number 4 here is that some of the messaging that might be also helpful and conversations we can have is to remind people of past threats that were overcome. I know my healthcare organization was over 100 years old. There had been many internal and external threats that had come and gone over that 100-plus-year-old history. And sometimes people and teams and entire organizations may need to be reminded how strong they actually are, how resilient they actually are, and even be reminded of the important qualities and behaviors and actions that it took, such as collaboration versus silos. The one big idea of today's episode, trust in leadership doesn't just protect culture in fearful times, it can actually grow during them. And the same is true with teamwork. Teamwork doesn't have to be diminished during times of threat, even though that's what fear does, is it creates silo behavior. We can actually use the challenge. We can actually use the threat to unite us, to bind us together, to rise up together against any challenge. So we want trust to go up and we want teamwork to go up. And then fast forward to the future when we can look back and say, we got through this together. Threats can take a toll on your organization. Don't let the fear take a toll on it too. We may not be able to protect our organizations from every threat. We may have some real impacts, including negative ones, one that we don't wish for our organization from these threats. But don't let it take an additional toll on your culture. This is still in your control. And it may seem like an added burden or thing to do, but it's an added blessing when you have a teamwork and trusting culture during times of challenges. It will serve you well. So protect it, foster it, and definitely don't dismantle it during these times that are challenging.
Thanks for tuning in to Culture Change RX. If you found value in today's episode and you are a believer in fostering change in healthcare, join us in making a difference. Follow, rate, and review our podcast on your favorite platform. Share it with colleagues and your network. Together, we can make a lasting impact. Until next week, keep inspiring positive change.